looking at the situation in Myanmar as well. Violence in the state of Rakhine has snowballed into a global humanitarian crisis. The mass exodus of Rohingya Muslims has been a matter of concern for India and the neighborhood. But now the army has reportedly found a mass Hindu grave, further complicating the situation and the story. WION's team travelled to Ground Zero to Rakhine to find displaced Hindu families in relief camps still trying to find their loved ones.
These are the streets of Rakhine. The fresh outbreak of violence here has grabbed headlines around the world. One can find empty huts and villages here, once inhabited by the Rohingya Muslims, who have in large numbers left the state. But it's not just Rohingya Muslims who have been subjected to violence. This is one of the relief shelters set up by Myanmar's government to house those who were displaced. We found at least 600 Hindu families living here, inconsolable after the loss of their loved ones.
हम इन लोगों से बात करने की कोशिश करेंगे, जानने की, समझने की कोशिश करेंगे कि किस तरीके से यहाँ पर दिक्कतें हैं और वो क्या आप सोच रहे हैं। सर, आप ये बताइए कि ये जो लोग हैं, ये जिस तरीके से कैंप में लाए गए, कब कैंप में लाए गए, किस तरीके की इनकी दिक्कतें हैं, क्या इनके साथ हुआ था, कुछ आप बता सकें।
हाँ सर, हम पूछ के तो बताएंगे ना। তোমার তো কি হইদা এটা আসছে তো কতদিনের এটা কেলা আসছে তো কতদিন है তোমার এটা आनी थी। इससे आवाज ही नहीं निकलता है क्योंकि इसके परिवार सब खो गया, सब मर दिया, इसलिए ये ठीक से बोल नहीं पा रहा है।
घर में कौन कौन थे इनके साथ?
इनके साथ माँ बाप है, भाई बहन है, भाभी है, पूरा परिवार है, कुल मिला कर 23।
Each member of this relief camp has a horrific story to tell. They are living in dire and unhygienic conditions. Relief and medicines have been slow to reach these areas. They are living on hope of the world taking notice of their plight. Many are counting on India to intervene.
क्या भारत सरकार की तरफ से आप लोगों को, जो लोग यहाँ रह रहे हैं कैंप में, किसी तरीके की मदद मिली?
नहीं मिलता, कुछ नहीं मिलता इंडिया सरकार में।
आप क्या चाहते हैं?
हाँ?
क्या चाहते हैं?
हम लोग में इंडिया सरकार का मदद चाहता है, इमा खाना वाना वो सब कुछ लगेगा।
More than 400,000 Rohingyas have travelled across to the border to Bangladesh. But around 1,000 Hindu families are said to be missing, raising fears and the question, who could be behind these brutal attacks?
Welcome back. Hours after winding up discussions in Delhi, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis was in Kabul ahead of the expected arrival of more American troops from home bases. Mattis was circumspect about their numbers, although various figures have been reported in the media.
I prefer not to go into the specific numbers right now. We are bringing in more Americans. There are also more coalition forces, non-Americans who are coming in. I don't want to tell the enemy exactly what we're doing, but the whole point is to make certain that we have a compelling battlefield advantage over anything the Taliban tries to mass against your forces. We're not going to stand for that.
Fresh from his talks with Indian leaders, Mattis confirmed one point, that Pakistan remained a concern.
So far as Pakistan, we will watch Pakistan's choices. We will engage with Pakistan. We will continue to work in a unified way between NATO, the coalition, the Afghan government, and the other regional governments in South Asia as we try to set the conditions for a positive set of nations in teamwork against the terrorists, Taliban, Daesh, ISIS, whoever they might be.
There's been no hint of what the U.S. strategy could be. While Mattis held out the olive branch to the Taliban, President Ghani made it clear that Afghan territory cannot be used to destabilize neighbors.
We need to all recognize that a stable Afghanistan is in everybody's benefit, and Afghanistan can become the platform for regional cooperation. Afghan territory will not be permitted to be used for destabilization of any of our neighbors, and this is a cardinal principle with us. We do not differentiate between good and bad terrorism and do not engage in destabilizing our neighbors.
Were the Taliban listening? As Mattis conferred with Afghan leaders, rockets landed near the airport, causing some injuries. It confirmed a view that the Americans have a tough fight on their hands. An assessment by the respected Long War Journal is depressing. The Taliban controls 41 districts and contests 118 others. Control is defined as administered by the Taliban, which provides security and Sharia law rules. The Taliban also claims some control in 25 other districts. Overall, 45% of Afghanistan is under the control of Taliban or contested by them. The Long War Journal assessment makes another interesting point, that the Taliban rely heavily on rural areas for support, recruitment and training. Rural areas function as bases from where the Taliban attacks urban centers, constantly chipping away at the Afghan government's legitimacy. The Taliban strategy of controlling rural areas across neighboring provinces is seen as a smart move. It enables ease of movement, as is evident in Taliban activity from Farah province in the southwest to Paktia in the east, covering 7 provinces. Joining us this evening, Michael Kugelman, Senior Associate for South Asia, the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, and Arun Singh, former Ambassador of India to the United States, with me in the studio. Good evening to both of you. Ambassador Singh, to you first. Is the timing of these visits a mere coincidence? The fact that James Mattis leaves India, lands in Kabul almost simultaneously, the Afghan CEO leaves for India.
No, I'm sure the timing is a coincidence because they are dealing with 2 different aspects of the relationship, India's relationship with Afghanistan, US relationship with Afghanistan and India, because Mattis' visit is focusing more on the defense and the security aspect of the relationship, and the CEO, Dr. Abdullah's visit, is focusing more on the economic and trade aspect of the relationship. Of course, other aspects would be discussed, but the main reason is this trilateral US, India, Afghanistan meeting on trade and economic issues that is going to be held here. But it also reflects the fact that if we are looking at stabilizing Afghanistan, then just focusing on defense and security will not be enough. Certain amount of attention has to be paid to economic and trade issues, and that's why US and India have been working together. And the meeting that I think where the 2 sort of converge is, one, that the meeting that is being held in Delhi is one that has been sponsored by the US. So it is a signal that the US is prepared to work with India and work more with India in terms of the effort being made in Afghanistan. And at another level, Defense Secretary Mattis came to India, and from here he has gone to Afghanistan. And this follows from the statement that President Trump made on August 21, that the US would like India to do more in Afghanistan. Because I think the US has assessed that through the effort that India has made in Afghanistan since 2001, through the economic assistance it has provided, which has had a major impact on the ground, that it has contributed towards stability in Afghanistan, contributed to certain aspects of economic development in Afghanistan, because India has built roads, it has built power transmission lines, it has rebuilt hospitals, it has rebuilt schools, it has provided infrastructure for transportation, buses, lots of medicines and doctors, and all these have been appreciated by the Afghan people. And according to most public opinion polls done, India is today the most popular country in Afghanistan.
Michael Kugelman, India is very popular, as Ambassador Singh said, in Afghanistan, the most popular, but India has refused to join the war, to send troops. What did America really expect?
Well, I think that's a wise decision on the part of India, and I think that the U.S. would not have expected India to put boots on the ground in Afghanistan. I know there had been some reportage in some corners, including in some parts of the Indian media, suggesting that Secretary Mattis went to India wanting to discuss that notion. To me, that seems really hard to believe. I think, as Ambassador Singh has indicated, Washington views the role of India as an important one, not necessarily as a security actor, though that certainly plays a role in terms of the work that India has done to provide training to Afghan forces. As I understand it, India has now agreed to train some Afghan police officers as well, not just soldiers, which is good. But I think that the U.S. sees India as a player that already has a very significant presence in Afghanistan through its many works in development and economics, And I think that the U.S. feels that it needs a lot of help in Afghanistan, which it does, and it sees India as being able to really fit that role of a friendly actor in the region that can contribute to economic development and broader development on the whole in Afghanistan. Because, as was said before, if you want to attain stability in Afghanistan, you can't do that with force alone. Quite the contrary. You need to focus on areas of the Afghan economy that have really suffered tremendously since the U.S. combat mission ended, and then the so-called war economy in Afghanistan started to recede. And, you look at different aspects of the Afghan economy, particularly the private sector. It has a lot of promise. You look at an area like the telecom sector, for instance, a lot of promise and has achieved a lot of success, but still a lot of work needs to be done. And I think that the U.S. views India as one country that could really help in a big way toward looking to economic development in Afghanistan.
Well, India knows better than many other countries how challenging it can be to build, to work on the economic and social development of an area that is hit by militancy, that is hit by terrorism. What role does India see for itself, and how does India see Afghanistan shaping in the years ahead, given the situation with the Taliban, the resurgent Taliban?
So India's approach has always been that we need a stable, independent, sovereign Afghanistan. Because earlier, before 9/11, the territory of Afghanistan was used to prepare terrorists for attacking India. Therefore, India would certainly like a government in Afghanistan that ensures that we don't have safe havens there again. So that's one essential focus. Clearly, where India is located geographically, it is very difficult for us to get involved in the security dimension of the relationship. Because how do you access Afghanistan? You cannot go through Pakistan with the security kind of assistance. And if you look at any other route, be it through Iran or through the northern route through Russia, to get into security dimension of the relationship would be extremely difficult. So a conscious decision, I believe, was taken way back in 2001 that India can contribute to stability in Afghanistan by providing economic assistance. Because a war-ravaged society needs economic assistance. And if you can provide economic support so that the refugees return to Afghanistan, they have jobs, they have income generation activity taking place, that can take away compulsions to get involved in insurgency or a war-like situation. And that is why India focused entirely on providing humanitarian assistance, doing small development projects. We built a hydroelectric dam, the Salma Dam, which again has been appreciated by the Afghan government and people because it is providing irrigation. So the whole approach has been that while other countries who are better equipped are looking at providing the security, India should focus on the economic development aspect, and the effort has to be to build the Afghan institutions, the Afghan governance institutions and the Afghan security institutions. Because in the long run, it is the Afghan government and its institutions that has to sustain the effort there and not outside entities.
Good evening, Mr. Azad. James Mattis landed literally with a bang in Kabul today. Do you believe this blast underscores how tenuous the situation in Afghanistan currently is?
Well, not at all. Those are some rockets to target the airport and some civilians. It's not that big deal. Actually, the war or the fight we are fighting, the war that is being fought against terrorism is indeed the greatest job. We are all doing it here. Some rockets, well, it did not cause any casualties at all. Only probably 11 injured people, and 3 terrorists were killed at a spot. However, the important thing was Mr. Mattis, the defense minister of the United States and the general secretary of the NATO and the Afghan president, the joint press conference, the meeting, and the fighting against the commitment to fight against terrorism was the actual deal today.
Michael, do you agree it was not a big deal, just a few rockets at the airport, a few people injured?
Well, it certainly could have been worse in that these rockets were launched in the airport after Mattis had left the airport. So in terms of casualties, it could have been a lot worse. But I think symbolically, it's a very powerful thing in the sense that, you have a top U.S. official in Kabul, and soon after he arrives, you have the Taliban attacking the airport. So I think that it could have been a lot worse. I agree with what was just said, but at the end of the day, it's not a good thing that you have a case of the Taliban launching significant numbers of rockets on the airport.
This was a message, clearly, Ambassador Singh. And is America, according to you, serious about co-opting the Taliban?
So I think I agree with Michael that symbolically it was a very important message from the Taliban doing the strike so soon after Secretary Mattis landed. But I think we are in a new situation. US has signaled that it is going to bring in additional troops. It has signaled that now it is also going to go after the Taliban. But because for a couple of years, US had not been attacking the Taliban. It was only attacking those which it thought were terrorist groups, the Al-Qaeda and others, because it wanted to promote some kind of a reconciliation with the Taliban. Now the mandate to the forces is to also go after the Taliban. So I think both sides will now assess the new situation, that with the new objective, the new levels of forces, is the ground situation going to change. And only that will determine if there is going to be space created for reconciliation. Many would argue that reconciliation is not possible. Some have argued, including in the US, that a military solution is not possible by itself and some kind of reconciliation may be necessary. So we have to see how it plays out.
Mr. Azad, how do you see this new situation and the strategy that is emerging?
Of course, as Mr. President said this morning, more commitments, and this is for sure that the United States and the NATO alliances and the international communities all together stand with Afghanistan, with the war against terrorism. As for the Afghan government, as the Afghan president and the defense minister of the United States say that Taliban or any terrorist cannot win the war, so the only way to survive for Taliban is to negotiate, to make peace with the Afghan people and the Afghan government. This is for sure. And the new the U.S. strategy for Afghanistan and for South Asia is a strong message. After that strategy was announced by in a press conference by the President of the United States, Mr. Trump, it really changed the situation, and we along with the international community and international forces here, we are winning the war. We have almost won the war, but of course that could not be done overnight. I mean, the war, the biggest war in the world now, it could not be won over the night, but as the Afghan soldiers, the Afghan security forces, the defense forces, and the international forces here, the way they are fighting and the way they are sacrificing, that really has changed the situation now. It will take time. Like I said before, it could not be done overnight, but it will, of course, have positive consequences.
Well, we'll wait and see. Michael Kugelman, Najibullah Azad and Ambassador Singh, thank you very much for joining us here on Gravitas. Let's shift our focus to what's happening in the other neighbor, with the world turning up the heat on Pakistan providing support and sanctuary to terror groups. Islamabad has changed gear. No more denials. Sample this from Foreign Minister Khwaja Asif during an interaction at the Asia Society in New York. He was asked about the Lashkar-e-Toiba. This is what he said.
Is under house arrest. But I agree with you that on that score, on that account, we have to do more. We have to do more. There are people in Pakistan who are who can be a liability in times of crisis for Pakistan and for the region. I agree with you. I don't disagree with that. But having said that, you must give us some allowance for what is happening within our borders.
But Asif also added that people like Hafiz Saeed were America's favored jihadis not very long ago. He said, and I quote, "Do not blame us for Saeed. These people were your darlings 20 years ago. They were being dined and wined in the White House. Now you say, go to hell, Pakistan." Asif said the usual lines about peace with India, referring to Kashmir and the need to resolve it. But he also made the point that former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had tried his best to build bridges with New Delhi, for which he was reviled at home.
His political career for achieving or stabilizing our relationship with India. I won't say that it can be pleasant or a lovey-dovey relationship overnight, but stabilizing our relationship with India.
Northeastern India is home to a number of insurgencies. Many of these groups have divided and subdivided. Some were gradually squeezed and rendered irrelevant by army operations, while in other cases they signed peace deals with the government or broke up. Here's a look at some of the major insurgent groups that remain active. The United Liberation Front of Assam was established in April 1979 by Paresh Barua and Arvind Rajkhova to fight for an independent Assam. The group is classified as active, meaning it continues to carry out attacks on security forces despite suffering heavy losses in men and material. The National Democratic Front of Bodoland was formed in 1989 and is campaigning for an independent ethnic Bodo state. The United Liberation Front was founded in November 1964 by Samrendra Singh to fight for an independent socialist Manipur. In 1994, it launched an armed struggle. The National Socialist Council of Nagaland IM, formed in January 1980 by Isaac Swu and T. Muiwa, wants to set up a greater Naga state comprising Nagaland, parts of Manipur and Arunachal Pradesh. The All Tripura Tiger Force, formed in 1990, comprises tribals who have been reduced to a minority in Tripura by Bengali immigrants. This group wants the expulsion of all Bengali-speaking people from Tripura. Myanmar is a key collaborator for India in taking on these insurgent groups. It is well known that the Kaplang faction of the Nagas has a base in Myanmar and another in China's Yunnan province. Similarly, the Ulfa is based in Myanmar and Yunnan. India needs to keep Myanmar on its side if it wants intelligence and logistical help when taking on these groups. Improved ties in the last few years have seen a steady flow of intelligence on the movements of these insurgents, and Myanmar's tacit approval of Indian troops entering its territory in hot pursuit of the insurgents. This is Palki Sharma Upadhyay for WION.